Jujutsu Kaisen sequel manga is here. Coming out almost out of nowhere, only having been announced a couple of weeks ago, the first chapter has just dropped, and it's already off to a pretty great start. And that was not necessarily guaranteed, because sequels to popular manga and anime have a tendency to come out at a loss due to the fans of the original series having such high expectations built up over years of reading it. So high in fact that it's pretty much impossible for the new series to meet it, especially in just one chapter. And even though we shouldn't, a lot of modern day manga and anime fans have a tendency to look at the very first chapter or episode of a new series, and that one only. And if it doesn't immediately draw them in with the premise, then it is forever discarded into the pile of series they refuse to ever enjoy, forever labeled as nothing but trash. But I will say I've heard mostly praise around this new sequel, with very few people speaking out against it, so far it's off to a pretty good start. And I think what makes this one so much easier to get into is that it's set 68 years into the future, and we start off with the mindset that the cast of the last manga are all well past retirement age or already long gone. In fact, we start the chapter off by basically killing off two major characters, Maki and Yuta, who, if you didn't read the aftermath chapter of JJK or just simply forgot because of how long it's been, we did find out that they eventually got married, and we got to see their grandkids at the end. We also saw that Panda was still technically around in that chapter, but we don't see him in this one, which I'm hoping changes in the following chapters because I like Panda, I like him a lot, and I wasn't a fan of the fact that he essentially did nothing in the finale of the story. Actually, not essentially, he literally did nothing in the finale. So I'm hoping he'll at least have some kind of role in this new story, maybe as like a sort of mentor for this newer generation. And speaking of the newer generation, the entire first chapter introduces us for the second time to Yuta and Maki's grandkids, Suguri and Yuka, who so far seem to be our main characters. Though it is kind of odd that we're not following someone related to Yuji instead, especially considering in the popularity polls, Yuji never ranked lower than 3rd, while Yuta at best made it to 5th, and Maki only made it to 9th, at the height of their importance to the story. So you would think that Yuji being the main character of the previous manga, and the fact that he was always one of the top 3 most popular characters in the series at all, that we'd be following the next generation of his family line. But if I had to guess why, it's because Gege had already established these two at the end of the series, so it was easier to use them as the basis for this new story over inventing a brand new character or characters related to our previous MC. Also, it made the conflict between the two very easy and actually reasonable to set up, because as Yuta's grandkids, they are automatically a part of the Gojo clan, which means they are beholden to the rules and orders the head of the clan sets on them. One such rule being that Suguri, having been born with very little cursed energy, is gifted with Rika's ring by the clan's head as a means of protection, despite Yuta personally giving it to Yuka before he died. And that is basically the crux of their relationship in this first chapter, the two fighting over ownership of the ring. And look, I know what you're thinking, pretty standard sibling plot, but here's the thing. Suguri doesn't actually want the ring. It was forced on him. If it was up to him, he'd be more than happy to give it back to his sister because he knows just how much it means to her since she had a very special relationship with her grandpa, just like he had with their grandma. But he can't just simply say, hey, you could catch and toss the ring back to her. The head of the clan has to recognize that he is strong enough to not need it for protection and then allow him to give it back to her. Which is like a whole other situation in itself because I really don't see it being that simple. Even if he does manage to prove that he is strong enough that he doesn't need a ring, I doubt the head of the clan is going to let something that powerful just be handed off to his sister when she doesn't really need it either. In fact, depending on how the story develops, I can definitely see a portion of the story devoted to them fighting the head of the clan over ownership of the ring. But anyway, that does seem like it's going to be the driving dynamic between the two siblings throughout the story. Yuka working hard so that she can prove she's stronger than her brother so that she can take the ring back from him, while Suguri works hard to prove he's stronger so that he can give it back. They're both working towards the exact same goal, but taking such opposite directions in getting there that they're actively hindering the other. And you know what? I love it. I am 1000% on board with this kind of sibling story, and I'm looking forward to seeing how Gege develops this going forward. And speaking of siblings, we get introduced to a brand new character, Maru, whose face you've likely seen over the promotion for the series, who we find out on the very first page of this chapter is actually an alien. Like legit came from space in a spaceship type of alien. Which, the second I heard that aliens were going to be involved in the plot as a new introduction to the lore, I instantly got Boruto flashbacks. Not so much that I was turned off by it, I actually like the fact that after the ending of Naruto, Boruto picked up the slack of trying to properly add Otsutsuki into the story and explain more about them. But it's definitely not something everyone is on board with, so I expected the same negative reaction here. But so far, haven't seen many naysayers. And before anyone commented down below, I don't think we're going in a direction where we're retconning curses to be some sort of alien species, just that there are planets out there that have similar occurrences and abilities. Like whatever planet Maru comes from, they don't call their monsters curses, and they don't say that they use Jujutsu sorcery, but it's essentially the same thing. Getting back to the whole sibling aspect of his character though, while he spends time with Yuka in this chapter, he mentions having a younger brother who he's also at odds with, and it's the main reason why he's so insistent on helping the two mend their fence, because he doesn't want them to end up like him and his brother. A brother who is not named or shown throughout the entire chapter. And because of that, I've seen a lot of people, like a surprising amount, try and put some connection between him and Sukuna, which, depending on his age, there might be some truth to that. Like maybe his younger brother came to Japan thousands of years ago, and he is like one of Sukuna's ancestors. That is a very valid possibility, but I think it's much more likely that his brother is going to be saved for a later reveal as the main antagonist of the story. As of right now, there's not really much else to talk about with Maru's character. So far, he's very likable, very friendly, despite how intimidating he came off in the opening pages of the chapter, seeming more like a hostile force towards Earth at that point, versus someone who's trying to secure peace between the two races. Because as of right now, it seems like that's what his mission here on Earth is, to see if his species and Earthlings can coexist. He does have a limit put on him by his superiors during the mission he goes on with the two siblings, where he's not allowed to really assist them using his curse technique or whatever they call it on his planet, a rule that he ends up breaking not only once, but twice before the chapter's over. So I'm interested in seeing what the consequences are for that, and why they put the limit on him in the first place. Also, since he couldn't do very much in this first chapter, that means we've only scratched the surface of what he can do, so it's going to be very interesting to see the full extent of his power later on. Just like Sukuna, I have a strong feeling that he's going to have multiple abilities that basically outclass almost everything else we see any other character doing. Now, I didn't talk too much about the mission they're on because it's a very standard kidnapping situation with a very common throwaway intro villain that is just powerful enough to make the main characters get serious, but not enough to really push them and their abilities. Though he does set up the idea that Earth is facing an alien invasion, and we can expect to learn more about that in the coming chapters. It's likely going to be a situation where Maru can't convince his superiors that they can coexist with humans, then they're probably just going to destroy the Earth. But this is still at the very beginning of the story, so I could be completely wrong. All in all, I really enjoyed this first chapter, which surprised me because I was not a huge fan of the last arc of JJK, but if JJK can continue to deliver this level of writing, I'm definitely on board with the story going forward. But let me know in the comments down below, what did you think of this very first chapter?